Good morning. I'm Jade Barrett. I'm with the Great American Bridge Tour, and I have a question. The question I have is, why do we bid? Now, I've asked this question of a lot of players over the decades that I've been a trainer, and I always want to know what it is their perspective is. And usually the first response someone gives me is that they want to tell their partner what they have. We can't do that in one bid. We can do it in a conversation. I think about bidding like this, is that I'm starting the platform for which to have a dialogue. It's like you go up to your friend and say, "Hi, I got something to say." Actually, it's a little easier than that because we go up to them and say, "Hey, I've got something to say, and I have some spades." Or we go up and say, "I have a balanced hand with like 14 to 17 or 15 to 17 points, and what do you want to do with this?" Some bids are questions, some bids are answers, and some are just statements. And we can lump all of these bids into some category. Not all bids mean the same thing at the same time. Like context and dialogue. One of the phone calls I had in my life many years ago made me think about how I didn't really want to bid. And, I like to tell this story on my mom, so let's, take it in stride. So one time my mom called me up and I answered the phone and she said, "Hi, we need to talk, but not right now." And she hung up. The consternation that was involved in that call lasted for weeks, and she really got, a lot out of it. Now, I'm sure there was some reason she suddenly had to hang up, but I can tell you that I've been in auctions, in bidding auctions, where that kind of thing happened. The way that happens is where an opponent opens and my partner doubles, and the opponent bids and I bid, and suddenly the auction stops. And suddenly a hand comes down that maybe I wasn't expecting. A lot of times I'll have conversations with developing players where they would have bid more, but they were afraid. Or they were going to bid more, but they didn't know what their bids meant. I can understand that. The problem is that once we've started a dialogue, we really have to finish it. Why we bid is twofold. One is because that's part of the rules. We have to bid. That's a responsibility we have. The discussions that we're supposed to have. There's an auction period. The auction period isn't over until everybody's done talking, which is apparently 3 passes. I can promise you sometimes there are 3 passes and the person who's made the last bid wasn't really done talking. Or maybe one of the other people wasn't done talking. Usually the person behind the first pass, behind the last bidder. The point is that we are going to talk until we need to stop. Unfortunately, a lot of players don't recognize when that need to stop occurs. Now, as a competitor, I believe that if I am aggressive in the auction, that if I extend the auction, for example, what I mean by extending, you might call by preempting. Like say they open a club on my right and I bid 2 hearts. I know that my left-hand opponent, if they think they have to say something, will. It's a human thing. That people will bid or talk until they think they've been heard. they might not know for sure if they've been heard, but they're going to say something. They have to get their hand off their chest. And if you put some pressure on the opponents, they're going to bid. So one of the reasons we bid is to interrupt the conversation. It's kind of rude, really, but it's a competitive world, and you have to get your words in too. The idea of allowing a dialogue to occur unimpeded provides the opportunity for the opponents to get the hand right more often. A lot of times there's nothing you can do about it. You have a terrible hand, you don't have the right bids, you don't have the right suits, you don't have the right points, you just have to sit there and listen. It's sort of like when you were a kid being told to be quiet in the corner while the adults had a conversation. In a competitive world, the higher the level of play, the more competitive those auctions become. Now, I can tell you that I have a lot of tools, and I use a lot of tools where I can have a constructive, unimpeded auction with my partner to get to some place that has a good, perhaps perfect place. The problem is that I have a lot of rude opponents. They bid in our auction, they interfere, they take actions that remove our time. I mean, each bid is being a unit of time. So over the years, I've developed tools that allow us to compete more effectively, but none of them is as useful as the original Al Roth Sputnik double. That is a negative double, but it doesn't promise the way that it has evolved. It doesn't promise for the other major. It usually has for the major. It usually has 8 or more points, sometimes 7. It usually has the opposite shapes, but not always. I mean, there are times where you just have to double, where you have a constructive hand without a clear call. And that's really what that bid was designed for. I mean, you imagine holding 13 points and the auction's got a club, a spade, and you don't have spade stopped, and you don't have 4 hearts, and you don't have 5 clubs, and you really don't want to bid 2 diamonds on a 4-card suit. You just double. And you don't really have another call. And that's part of the conversation. My partner said, hey, I have, 3 or more clubs and a decent hand. This guy says to his partner that he's got some spades, and I said, hi, I've got a thing, and I really don't know what it is. I have a constructive hand without a clear call. Why we bid is to have conversations that allow us to state the general strength and nature of our hand. And the longer the auctions go on, the more specific the bids become. You open a heart, I bid a spade. I know you have, typically 5 or more hearts, and we know I have typically 4 or more spades. And a reason to bid. I know you have an opening bid. You know I have a response. And now we have to have a dialogue that clarifies these things. You might bid a no trump, saying I have a minimum balanced hand with 5 hearts. I might pass saying, okay, well, that's as good as anything. Or I might bid 2 hearts saying, well, 2 hearts seems as good as anything, or 2 spades saying we should probably stop here. I might bid 2 of a minor, depending on our methods. I might bid 2 clubs saying, tell me more. And this is where our own personal language comes into play. What do we agree to play? Do we agree to play weak jump shifts? Do we play Birkin raises? Do we play Jacoby to no. As a game force, do we play limit raises? And if we do play limit raises, do they promise 4? Do they promise 3? Do we play negative, a sort of like a negative situation where pass just says I never have anything, or one no is forcing, or one no is limited? There's a lot of colloquial dialects of bridge, and every colloquial dialect has slight variations. As one of the things about standard American is there really isn't one. There's sort of standard West Coast and standard Midwest and standard Washington and Northeast and East Coast. But there's a general attitude towards the game. Like standard American has become to mean that you're not playing 2-1. There are people who play standard American with a forcing no trump. There are people who play standard American without it. And it's okay. You know, we talk a lot about partnership agreements. Partnership agreements are very important. They're actually vital, because it's those agreements that allow you to establish a dialogue, a conversation. It also requires you to develop some tools to deal with the people on your left or your right who are trying to obstruct your conversation, who are trying to interrupt you, who are trying to get in the way. Those tools are doubles, cubids, and believe it or not, passes. And it's important to understand that pass doesn't mean nothing. I open a heart, it goes pass, you bid 2 clubs, and let's say that we're playing that as a game force. And the opponent's bid 2 diamonds. I have an agreement for what pass is. Pass is I have a diamond control. Bidding says I have first round control and whatever I rebid. So like a heart, 2 clubs, a heart, pass, 2 clubs, 2 diamonds. 2 hearts says I have first round diamond control. I have 6 hearts. I don't have a great hand. Otherwise, we're just guessing, right? I mean, say it goes a heart, pass, 2 clubs, 2 diamonds, and I bid 4 hearts. You know, I sort of signed off, right? But do I have a diamond control? Do I have 2 diamond losers? I mean, I've added ambiguity. And when you have a good hand, the worst thing that you can do, right, is to have to guess. So me, as your partner, when I open and you put a game force on, it's rude of me to shut the auction off when your hand is not limited. People are often afraid that the opponents are going to steal from them. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're in trouble. Bidding in suspect situations, right, where you're not sure whether it's right to bid again or not, might actually save your opponents and hurt yourself. Conversationally, it helps if you translate the auctions into English or to whatever your native language is. Like when I open a heart, you can think 5 or more hearts and an opening bid, and you bid 2 diamonds. I'm thinking, well, you typically 5, but maybe 4 diamonds in a forcing hand. I rebid 3 clubs, I have clubs. You rebid 3 diamonds, you have more diamonds. If I have a hard hand where I don't really want to bid hearts again, and I don't really want to bid no trump because I don't have it stopped, I might bid like 3 spades, which is, for most pairs, like, what do you want to do now? So I don't want to bid 3 no. Do you want to bid 3 no? Do you want to bid 4 hearts? By the way, I don't have any diamonds either. You know, or I might not, or it reminds me of the conversation of, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? I don't know. Where would you like to go? And 2 hours later, you're still trying to figure it out. But then maybe you can decide where to go for dessert. The other part about conversations and bidding and why we bid is to listen. Listening to our partner in the auction. Listening to the opponents in the auction. Whether the opponents are bidding or not. Because often their silence is very telling. I have a better idea. You talk and listen, as opposed to talk and wait to talk again. Focus on your partner's auction. Don't be too concerned about making sure that you get your hand across. Because why we bid is to have a dialogue that allows us to get to the right place. That's an interactive conversation. All the conversations that you always want to have when you're in a partnership. It doesn't mean there aren't times where your hand has to dictate the auction. Usually those are hands in which you've opened 2 clubs or you've opened and made a strong jump shift. If it's true for you, it's true for your partner. There are times your partner will have to dictate the auction. You can call it captaincy. You can call it whatever you'd like. But what I know is that when my partner says, I have to tell a story, that means I have to listen and I have to participate as best I can in helping partner realize what the full value of our collective hands are. It is a partnership game, and at times it truly requires the practice of blind faith. Have a great time. I hope you have a successful regional, and practice listening. I'm Jade Barrett from Great American Bridge Tour. Thanks.